All right, we'll go ahead and we'll get going here. It's noon. So, Brenda, if you'll call roll, please.
And would everybody please turn on your mics?
Here.
Blair. Here. Blair.
Here.
Hecht.
Here.
Horken.
Here.
Helms.
Here.
Thank you. All right, approval of minutes from July 18th, 2023.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. Bills and communication. Review of accounts payable for August 1st, 2023. Anybody have any questions? All right, if nobody has any questions, and we can move on to the approval of accounts payable for August 15th, 2023. Anybody have any questions on that?
Move approval.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Larson.
Yes.
Blair. Yes. Blair.
Yes.
Hecht.
Yes.
Horken.
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right. Next up, your reports, sir.
There are no delinquencies.
Okay. And then next on the list here is financial reports for June and July of 2023.
Thank you. I sent actually Brenda sent all of the June and July activity for each account, and then the cash balances are included in your packet. As you can see, the housing loan has, we did get repaid for the $100,000 loan that we had outstanding for $99,000. So if you look in July, there's $136,000 in that account. The general EDA general fund is $104,000 in the whole because we do a transfer year end, and we budgeted, I think it's about $220. So we're within the budget and all that. And then all the other funds are kind of self-explanatory. The last meeting, we did talk about the town square balance, that there was a transfer that got missed in 2015, and it was just found now. And so that was done in July, so you see that balance is zero. So that was put into the Sunshine Terrace Fund. So any questions? Those are the highlights for the month, 2 months, I guess.
Just one question, Carla, on that town square account, now that it's at zero, is it the practice that we just go ahead and close that account out?
According to, in our accounting system, we can't really close anything because of the past history of them, we would wipe them out, so. What I'll just do, it'll just sit there. So what I'll do is when you get these reports, next time I will just take it off the report. So, because I clean it up, so just the reports that we want to see. So, you're welcome.
Anyone have any other questions for Carla? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and move on to the director's report for July 2023.
There's basically, it's normal type activities. There's just one thing I wanted to point out to you, is that we're looking for ways to possibly pay for street improvements to the existing streets in the industrial park. One thought is that it's possible to look at some U.S. Economic Development Authority dollars. They require a 50% match, and the question will be where we come up with the match and how do we do that. But there's a group of people looking at that right now. Carla, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, what I'd add to that, or Rika too, is that this EDA funding is tied to disaster areas from flooding last year. And since Polk County and ourselves were in the flooding and declared a disaster, that there's money available for that. We're working with the Northwest Regional Development Commission, and Jim Rutka, and personally, he's our contact there. And he said there could be a possibility that they might fund up to 80%, but as it's written out now, it's 50/50. And there is money set aside specifically for Minnesota, and most of that is in northwest Minnesota. And there's only one other project that has been submitted for that, because it's kind of open till it's the money spent. And the community of Roseau has applied for stormwater and stuff, he said. So they're the only community that he has so far doing that, so would be a great opportunity. We're looking at possibly even a $6 million project, but we're getting new estimates on that. Anything to add, Reed?
Timeline's open-ended?
Yeah, open-ended timeline, it's, the funding is available until it's all allocated. So I think there's a little urgency to move quickly so that we get in ahead of any other projects that may come. Like Carla said, Roseau is the only community that has submitted an application for the Minnesota district so far. Dollar amount of the project, yeah, the 50/50 match is the biggest thing. As Mr. Gordy referenced, it's figuring out what our total estimates are and what a local match would be and where we would find those local matching funds. So we've got some more meetings even still this week to have more discussion about that with some updated estimates to truly get a feel for how realistic an application could be for us.
There are a few state grants out there that we're trying to look at. There's a local road improvement. I know there's a webinar on that next week on how that funding, some of the funding that's come out, there's not a lot of information on it. It's just, we're going to do this. We don't know how we're going to do it with the state. So a lot of it is timing on this and that. And we can use the state as matching dollars. It doesn't have to be local dollars to match. The other thing we're looking at is if some of the project has to do with stormwater, wastewater, or water, we could use some of those funds as our matching dollars also. So it's just really, we're at the start and looking at every option we can.
Who's all looking at it? I'm just curious.
We've been having meetings with Jim Retka, referenced with Northwest Regional Development Commission, Carla and myself from the city's perspective, and then Steve Emery with Widseth from an engineering perspective. And at Widseth, Gail Leverson is a funding specialist that writes a lot of applications with the federal grant system. So we've had her involved in a couple of conference calls to this point. As so far, there's been no expense to the city to develop a plan or put this together, with the exception of the engineering estimate being updated. Once we get an idea of what that project total would look like, then we'll start to get a little more organized on what the cost of applying would be and be able to bring that forward to city council at that time.
So that's all that's needed then, would be that plan update to be able to submit it so that you would be able to apply for the grant? Is there any more legwork?
Well, there's a lot of legwork involved in the application itself. At a federal level, their applications are intense. There's a lot of work with businesses that are already in industrial park to understand what their plans are. There would be legwork involved in that. To this point, we haven't started any of that because we need to see what an updated cost of the actual project is to determine whether or not we're a good fit to even apply for it. We think we are, but we need to answer that question first and bring it to the city council level and discuss what matching funds would look like and where they would come from.
All you gotta do is drive out to the industrial park and you can see we're a good fit for it.
And that's how it
Yeah.
started.
We do
Yeah.
need some serious work
Yeah.
out there, and this is maybe a good
It
opportunity
is.
for us to jump a little bit on this and try to maybe expedite this somewhat and move it along some, because that roads are horrible.
Is this the 10th Street project, kind of bringing that back up to?
Yeah, there's actually 3 different kind of projects, and we're getting like 3 different estimates so that we could pick or choose. And so one of them is the frontage road right off Highway 2, which according to Jim, there might be actually some other dollars that we could use for that, possibly. And then 10th Street and then 11th Avenue, which is also very bad. What, like Reed was saying, once we get past that point, we need to have a discussion with the businesses there, because the main focus on this EDA grant is resilience, not even so much job enhancement or job growth, which would add to it, but the resilience of keeping businesses where we're at.
Retention.
Yeah, retention. So,
I would highly recommend that if we get to that point where we're going to start looking at redoing those roads, that we look at building them a little bit better and heavier, because everything out there is heavy.
Everything's
So
heavy.
let's build them a little bit stronger, you know. If we have to use more rebar, that's what we have to do, for thicker concrete or something. But we can't just put a regular street out there and expect it to hold up and last.
and there's also, Jim was talking about how there's different radiuses now for trucks and stuff out there, so that would all be worked into it.
That is the benefit of the federal program like this,
Yeah.
is their requirements are going to be very strict in that they are
Yeah, that'd be good.
designed and built for truck traffic.
So I know you said the timeline's open-ended. What is, I guess, your group's timeline on moving forward? Do you guys have kind of a plan yet on that, or?
I would expect that we'll have an estimate from the engineers by the end of this week, early part of next week. We have a meeting scheduled to revisit this with the group I just mentioned early next week, with the intent that once we have those dollars understood better, that we could bring it to a city council work session within the next couple of weeks to get an understanding of what the cost of applying would be. Number one, it's an important project, but we don't have a budget set up at this point that allows us to hire a grant writer and spend pretty extensive time working on an application like this. So to bring that to the city council first and foremost, and everybody understands what we're working on, I think that's going to happen in the next few weeks. And then it's a probably month to 2 month long project to be able to organize all the application materials and submit. So in all likelihood, this is, if we're submitting an application by the end of October, I think we're doing really well.
So are we looking at maybe doing this project next year, next summer? Or are we looking the summer afterwards, or?
That's a great question. I don't even know if I know the notice of funding opportunity well enough, Daniel, to be able to say when the funds become available.
Okay.
I know
It was just a curiosity. No.
I'll search that and follow up with you all. I know what dollars are available, but I didn't look that close at when they become available.
Okay,
We'll get back to you on that.
thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Any comments? All right, so we'll move on to the next part here. So we need to have a public hearing here on the Hawks Manufacturing Computer Loan. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Move.
Moved by Hecht, second by Brian, by Mr. Larson. Anybody have any comments on this? Maybe somebody from the loan committee? I know I saw the recommendation there. Anybody want to make any comments on this?
There's not much to comment on it.
No, it's a simple.
It's pretty straightforward is what it
loan for
looked like to
equipment They
me.
need to do their operations,
Okay,
and it's 1/3 of the total. What they're asking for from us is 1/3 of the total need.
right, and so, okay. So everybody's okay with the recommendation, loan at 1% interest for 10 years for the $49,000?
And I think that loan amount and the interest amount follows the the policy that the city is, or the EDA is already established.
Okay.
So if it's something that you're agreeing upon, that's following our own policy that we have in place currently.
Perfect. Thanks, Ron.
Yeah, we've done business with them a lot, and they seem to be expanding all the time. I see no reason to
Yep.
move forward.
All right. Do we
Need
have
a motion
to-
now, or do we got to close public hearing?
We need
before
to close the
We gotta
public
close the
hearing,
public
then we have other business, and then we will vote on the loan.
So do I have a motion to
Move
close?
closure.
Moved by
Second.
Blair, second by Larson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Unfinished business. So the $100,000 builder incentive program status.
Carla told you about the,
Did we get a motion to approve that recommendation?
No.
no,
Not yet.
that's on item 7A.
Oh,
And you have told me many times that I need to follow things in order. Okay? So I'm trying to follow what you tell me to do.
She's just testing you, Paul.
She's just checking to see if I'm paying attention.
That's
all. Carla told you about the fact that there's no money in the account that we're going to use. The other account that's possible has only about $75,000. My feeling is it probably doesn't really do a whole lot at this point. We could do at most one loan. So let's put the program on, suspend the program for the time being until we have monies that are dedicated for it.
The money that you said we got paid back on one of them, that went into the housing fund, right? Is that available to do another one with?
I think what Paul and I need to do is sit down and for sure find out what the tax abatement is for this year and next year. And then
Make
I
sure there's
think,
enough in
and then
there.
I think that would be a possibility. So we'll have to look at the budget and the tax abatement to see what's coming out of that fund with the possibility that we could, if nothing else, to at least a 50,000 one in. But that is going to be my suggestion.
Okay.
Is that we look at what the tax abatements are with the budget, look to see what the budget will be, and then we can guess from that.
Yeah, I'm
Is that
very
some-
concerned with the abatements that there won't be enough money in there to cover the loan.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking, is because even if we could do one, I'd be in favor of still doing one if it helps get another house built, whether it's a spec home that goes for sale or whatever, so.
I wouldn't mind that. What do you got for us, Ron?
The only thing that I was going to state is that I obviously I know that the funding is coming out of the 280 fund, which is a kind of a variable fund that goes to other things. If this group believes that it's a beneficial program due to the fact that we've got no interest on that, it would give us a better competition in the region. Request, or at least discuss requesting from the city, a separate fund for this loan program, that it would have seed money in there of $300,000, wherever it came from, general fund, someplace else. It's just an isolated fund that would be for this, nothing else going out, nothing else coming in. It would be potentially beneficial. It would have to be a decision from this group, then it would go as a request, and then the city council would have it. But I know from the discussions that we've had that this group at least thinks it's beneficial right now, and has been beneficial right now, to try to sell those lots, get more development over here, and give the builders some incentive on using these low interest loans at the time. So that would be my suggestion if it's approved by this group.
I'm just wondering, what does the group think? Because what I would do is I would put that in with our budget request when we do that, and knowing that the loans, they're usually paid back within a year, and that it's just that 300,000 would be used every year, and it would be keep recycling, so.
Which we thought it was,
Yes.
in a way, until
Yeah,
the
and,
tax abatement
and the
comes
good thing
out.
is that we weren't out of money when people really wanted it. So my other question is the company still want that, or have they started building without that 100,000, or is that holding them up right now?
I think if you give them the option that,
Well, I'm sure they
that this
take it.
is
My
something
question-
that they
yes.
can get
Yes.
with the way interest is right now with construction loans, if there's
Exactly.
a program, it'll be
Yeah.
utilized.
That was my thought. With the way interest loans are right now, this is something that will help.
So why does it have to be interest-free? Why can't we get a % or two out of it, get something? I mean, it's still going to be better than what they're going to get anywhere else.
It was being done as an incentive, and it was done, well, one, the interest rates were low, but it was done as an incentive to try to encourage construction over here, and that's why we set it 0.
Exactly, I knew that, but I mean,
You bring up a
obviously
valid point.
times are changing, so
Yep.
why can't we get a little bit out of it so we can at least maybe try to,
Because
maybe we could build this up a little bit instead of,
where does the tax abatements come from next year? Or will we be done with tax abatements?
It's a 3-year commitment, and I think there's 2 more years left on it, is that
Well,
right, Paul?
actually, because of how long it takes for properties to come up to full value, it takes us close to 2030 before the commitment's complete. It's homes completed through 2 years or 3 years from now. It might be 3 years from now. And because a home that is completed then takes a couple of years to come up to full value, and then once it comes up to full value, people pay the taxes and get a rebate the following year, there's lag time. So it takes about 3 to 4 years after the last home that's eligible will receive the benefit from that.
So I guess what I'm hearing though is that the first step is to figure out where we sit at with the tax abatements. So I guess, can you guys get together and can we
We'll talk.
have something up on by the 12th of September for the next meeting?
It's my understanding that tax abatements are coming out of the sale of the lots, right?
That's the 280 account.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's where that money goes. So if you did the $100,000 and they pay that back, that could still go right back into this
Yeah, and it-
special
and it
account.
did.
We wouldn't have to worry about that. Then the sale of the lot would take care of the tax abatements.
Correct.
So
Yep, if the, like Ron said, if the council set up a loan fund account, then we wouldn't have to worry about the 280 fund. And the 280 fund, for example, we collect from, Valley Golf has a loan there, so we collect that every year.
Yep.
And that's about 18,000 we collect every year.
18,000 a year, 3,000 per month for 6
Yeah,
months.
so there is a way that we're somewhat sustaining it. Of course, the cost of closing on the loans come out of there. So yes, if we kept that intact, that fund would be intact for a good many years. It should be. So like Ron said, the best idea would be to have the council set up a $300,000 loan fund. I know when we set up no interest, interest rates were so low anyway, that's what we looked at. Where now it's actually more of a benefit for them because if you're buying a home, it's at least 7%. So I'm sure if you're building a home, it's probably closer to 10%. But yes, we could look at it. Maybe we look at that if the loan isn't paid back within a year, then we start charging interest because most of them sell within a year, right? So then you get a benefit. We also get a benefit if the money doesn't keep rolling. I mean, you can set it up any way you want.
I like Dale's idea that we should get something back. I mean, even if because if they're looking at a 10% and even we offered it at 2%
Yeah, I guess
It's a
the problem
great-
is you set that up and then interest rates drop and then you're not competitive anymore. I mean,
Well-
if you want to offer it, it's, I guess to me, in construction, if you want to offer the benefit to get somebody to get motivated to be here, you offer, that's the deal. And the city's getting the deal back by the property tax, by everything else over time. To me, that pays for itself, but that's just my
Well, and
opinion.
the hard thing is, it's not like we set up an easy amortization schedule, because you just don't give them the 100. So you pay the bill for $49,440
Yeah.
in 1 month, and then 4 months later, you pay, $35,200. So it's not as easy to, I mean, not that we can't do it.
Yep.
It's just, then they question, how did you figure out the interest and such? So
Yeah,
it is a really nice program if we could still do it interest-free.
Would this be
That's-
something that we want the loan committee maybe to take a
Yeah.
look at? Maybe today we suspend it until we
Yeah.
get the tax abatement. We have the loan committee take a look at this and see what kind of program we can come up with
I think this
possible
loan would be,
interest.
even if we did do the interest, that's why we're here, right? We can always change the rules again if we need to.
Yep.
I think the
If the
hard part
interest rate
with-
comes down, and which I think all of us sitting here right now knows that's probably not going to happen anytime real soon. But if it did, we could always change it, right? So, it isn't like that hasn't happened before, changing
The
things.
question that we would need to ask is what's necessary to achieve what we want to achieve. And if that can be done at 2%, it's 2%. If that can be done at 0%, then it's 0%. But that's something the loan committee can discuss.
I think the
Okay.
hard
First thing-
part with trying to get interest off it from a builder is that a builder is going to use this program if they see a benefit to it, that if they're slow and take advantage of not tying up more capital to go build a spec home. So if you're not building a spec home, a lot of times contractors are having the homeowner take the loans out. So now the homeowner can't come to us to get that 100,000. So the benefit to this loan is to get a contractor to come in to build a spec home for somebody to buy it. And if they're going to have to come in to build a spec home and borrow the money with interest on it still, they might not do it. So I think that's going to be the hurdle within there, is that you might say, hey, if you're a little bit slower right now, you can borrow this money, buy the lot for nothing down. You don't have a lot tied into it. And then when you sell it, you're going to be making a profit and then pay it back. And they're not tying up a lot of other assets for things that they might have going on.
But the interest, you wouldn't pay it until you pay the loan back, just pay the interest at the same time, not monthly type thing. I wouldn't think.
They take draws at different times. What they do is they submit their invoices for materials.
Okay.
And then, for example, we had one builder that did about $20,000 a month of invoices over 5 months, so you wouldn't even get up to the maximum amount until after 5 months. So it's a question, I think Carla was saying, if I understood her correctly, that are you charging 2% on the first 20,000, then you're charging, at what point do we start assessing the interest? Or do we do it at the point, if they haven't sold the home within at a certain date, that's when the interest gets charged? But that's all things that the loan committee can look at and talk about.
Well, I think that maybe, it's kind of part of Daniel's thing too. I think we might be wasting a lot of time here. We need to probably make that proposal to the city and see where we go with that before we think about all
And that was kind of my thought, is to have it go through the loan committee, come up with a proposal, bring it back to us.
Right.
Because we're going to have to suspend, we're going to have to wait here and see where the tax abatements and everything end up for this account anyway. So we're kind of at a standstill is the way that I see it at this moment in time. It gives us time to look at what we can do.
But based on Ron's recommendation of asking for a separate fund setup, that can be started.
Yep.
Yeah, my suggestion would be that you could vote on asking the city for that 300,000 to put in the budget, because we're going to start talking budgets like September 5th. I think we're going to start presenting it. So this needs to be in there at that time.
And then we can decide whether we want to do
Right.
interest on it or not. after
And then,
we find out.
and the big thing when this is presented to the council, yes, it's an outflow, but it's not an expense, in essence, because we're going to get reimbursed. So, what we would do is we would use our fund balance, which there's plenty of fund balance to do that. So it's, I'd build it in as an expense and a revenue, because typically you'd have it in a year, same kind of year. You might be off a month or two, but that's okay. So I would, for budgeting purposes, I would like for you to make a motion for that today. So I can
I'll
build it
so
in the
move
budget.
that we request the $300,000, because then we'll know even if this is a discussion item or not.
And then the loan committee could get together between now and then and pan out if and when interest would occur or whatever, so that we could bring that to the council. Was that okay with everybody, or?
Yeah.
Sure you're not bypassing the loan committee there?
No, the loan committee would meet between now and the budget. And then update the group that this is what the loan committee came up with. Can you have a vote
And the
by
loan
email?
committee doesn't even need to figure anything out until we know if we can even get the money or not anyway.
Well, that's true too.
We just set up the parameters.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if we charge interest or not. We just want the 300,000 that's going to be revolving when one is paid and another one can be given out.
I think that's the first thing, like she said,
Yes.
get it,
Put it in
vote
the-
on it, and
get
get
it
it on
part of the budget discussion.
into the budget now, and then if the city turns it down, we don't have to worry about it. If they
Right.
give it to us, then the loan committee can go to work.
So that we can
Exactly.
restart this program.
That decision's made then late December, right?
Well, where we're looking at preliminary decisions now.
Probably October.
It's got to be final decision before we act.
Correct, but when we look at the preliminary now, I guess we can get the feel for the council if this is something they're going to keep in the final or not. And it's not an expense per se, it's a cash flow. It's just a loan that we know is only going to probably be
It's a
outstanding
budget
for a
zero.
year.
It's a budget
Yep.
zero.
But do we want to take that as a loan to the EDA, or do we just want to?
No, and we've done other loans to other companies
Yeah.
before my time.
Okay.
But, they got paid off within years. So my suggestion would be is that we just set up an account, put 300 in there, and then if it goes out, it goes out. If it stays, when it keeps revolving, and it's just part of our cash balance, monthly cash balance that we've spent. $128,000 out of it.
So I take it that money we were talking about in that account that was sitting there doing nothing for all those years has disappeared now, huh? Or is it
No,
still in
it
there?
was transferred in 2015.
No, it got transferred, and
For
it was
purpose.
actually 30,000 more than what was supposed to be in 2015 because of interest.
So it got moved out of there so we couldn't use it, is what,
Correct.
basically.
It was done for improvement at Sunshine Terrace. Some of the rooftop improvements, I think was air conditioning and some things like that had to be done. And that was the source of money for doing that.
From what I understand from a couple residents, it needs a lot more too, but that's beside the point.
I'd second Diane's motion. The only thing is, I don't know if we ask for, whether it's 200 or 300, or, I don't want it to seem like we ask for too much, that with budget cuts and things going on right now, that they say, no, that's too much we give away. I would think we would need at least 200,000 in there, so I would say at least 200. If they'll give us 300 or more to put into there, that'd be great. I just don't know if we want to set a set number and go and say, we need this or we can't do it. Because I think we could do it with less than 300.
Well, I would suggest we do the 300 because it's 3 houses. That's 3 more houses we could sell. And that would be a discussion at city council. No, we only give 200.
Okay.
This would be one-time dollars that would give them a building, and then it's this revolving fund that keeps itself.
Well, we could just keep it, it would be kept in the general fund as a loan. And so it has its own account. And so, that account starts with 300,000. So we had done this with another company, and we had a loan in our general fund. It was in our 101 fund. So there's an account that says loan to X and X. And so it would stay in the general fund. So it wouldn't even affect cash if nobody used it, because it would still be in the general fund cash. So the only thing would affect the cash in the general fund if somebody uses it. And then, once I get paid, it keeps revolving.
So it wouldn't go over to the EDA fund, it would stay in the general fund?
No, it'd stay in the general fund.
And
Would that mean we'd have to get council action every time that we draw from it then?
No, if we have the program set up,
Yeah.
and they can, in the resolution, it just says that the EDA will be presented on who wants it, and they will approve that for those loans. I mean, you can set it up that
I
way.
mean, it's just got a max on it, so we can't
Yep.
just keep going, and then.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when that 100,000
Yes.
comes back,
Yep,
it goes back
that's
in,
right.
and it can go out to the next
Well, and the max
person
would be,
tomorrow
we'd
or
have
something.
3 outstanding at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because everybody gets up to 100.
Right.
And then once one is paid, then you can give out another one.
You mentioned that the closing costs come out of there too?
The 280 fund, they would not come out of the loan fund.
That's good.
Yep, so it'd just be a straight 300. And then the max you can give it to one is 100, so you could give
Yeah.
out 3. Okay, somebody comes in, they only take 90,000, okay, well, so say they're all 3 are out, there's 10,000 in the fund. You can't spend it because there's 3 already out. And then when that 90 comes back in, you can give out
Start
another one.
And Ron writes a
And it's worked
mortgage.
really well,
Yeah.
I think they've been
Yeah.
paid within a year from when they start, right?
I don't think that there's a big issue with that. And regarding the $100,000 program, typically they're getting the lot and they're getting up to $100,000. However, at the time we transfer that lot, we actually do a mortgage for the entire amount. So they're already paying the mortgage registration tax, and they're assisting with their share of the closing. So you shouldn't have any additional fees because those things are coming out right up front when we close on the loan and we close on the lot, so to speak. There's already they just give us $1,000 earnest money that goes in, and then we record the mortgage.
I think what Mr. Larson and our job would be to convince the city that they really need to do this if they want to sell these lots. Otherwise, we're going to have
helps.
these lots forever.
And our tax base goes up, our tax base and our
Exactly.
tax levy will go down
People
to
aren't jumping out
residents
to
if
buy
we
these
get
lots
homes.
Unless they got incentives.
Yeah, and I think it's helping. I think if we pushed it or reminded on a regular basis, you'd probably have more takers. There's only 3. I know the contractors that I've talked to and did closings with are very interested in it. You know, a lot of times it's out of sight, out of mind, where they're just not thinking about it anymore because it's not something that's really being approached. So I think it's a good program if that's what you're looking at. I mean, it's not going to sell them all by themselves, but it does give another avenue to be able to do that.
And the fact that this could be included in the budget, that would also bring some attention to it again, and so that the contractors out there would go, oh, that's right, they did just set that up again, and we need to start using it again.
And we will have created a secured source of funding for the program until such time as all the lots are sold, and at that point, it goes away.
Yeah, in fact, when you, I'm thinking when you talked about advertising it, I was thinking of this one day, how, they're out in the, what do they call it, the drone, the whole new city kind of out there, that we probably could get some posters around the city saying, get a lot in East Grand Forks, build here, because they're hiring many, many people out there, and they're young families typically, so I think we just need maybe to get some posters around town showing that we have lots available in East Grand Forks. Maybe even on there, the building incentive, you could put something on there. They might have different builders that they want to build, so I think we really need to start advertising out there, like is it Northrop Grumman and a couple of them out there? Maybe we can put something on a bulletin board to try advertise a little bit more. Maybe there's other places in town that are growing and looking for people that we could get some posters up for sale, for lots for sale.
This is a builder incentive. Probably I would need to talk to all
Right,
the
and
builders directly.
I was jumping out, where not just the building incentive, but just the actual sale of the lots. Is that there's a lot of places that we probably could advertise that we have lots available from the city, and they're actually at competitive rates compared to Grand Forks and such. So I think we just probably need to do a better advertising campaign.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that comes with the MLS. So, you know, I mean, you're getting that just with the MLS. The issue would be more on our realtors are already talking, if it's a contractor, kind of presenting them with these programs. But that's only after they're being contacted, regarding our lots. If you had that part out there for the builders and keep reminding them, they might do it with, ahead of time, so.
Right, I just, if you go to other cities, lots of places you go, they have pamphlets on what the city is, and we haven't had those for years that I know of. Just, what is our city about, and pictures in it, and, we have lots for sale and that, so I would just, maybe just a little poster instead of spending money doing something like that somebody just reads while they're waiting for their ice cream or dinner or something,
Well, so we have a motion out here right now. So the motion is to ask the city council for $300,000 for the home loan program, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have that, Brenda?
I do.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
And Justin seconded.
And, Justin is seconded, so if you
And
could
Justin, you're comfortable with what Caller talked about?
Comfortable with the 300, yep.
Yep.
So if you'll do a roll call vote, I would appreciate it.
Larson,
Yeah.
Blair,
Yes.
Black,
Yes.
Hecht,
Yes.
Horken,
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
Do we need to make a motion to suspend the current program?
That was going to be my
Well, we
next.
just don't, basically, Carl and I will make sure that
There's no
any
money, so it is
available
suspended.
Before we do anything, because if there's not money available, we can't do the program anyway.
Sounds
But
good.
you know what, you may want to do that just so you have it in the minutes and in the record to say, hey, we're suspending it.
Okay, I'll
until
move
such-
suspension of the current program.
Second.
Can you do a roll call vote on that, please?
Yep, just a second.
No problem.
Did we get a vote?
Larson,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Black,
Yes.
Hecht,
Yes.
Horken,
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right. Next, for part of unfinished business here, succession plan for director retirement with 2024 EDA administration budget.
I wrote you a long report. One of the things we talked about last time was a lot of the extraneous stuff, and I did not point out the major things that we do. So what I did in the report is identified broken down by our priorities, the more significant things that are done. Now, I can go through and read them, but I'm sure you all read them yourselves. I'm going to cut to the chase. I handed something out to you, a summary of options. I've reduced the commodities by 1/3. I went through and I chopped whatever I thought we could safely remove from the budget. I reduced the SBDC support from $10,000 to $5,000 so that, you need something?
Nope.
Okay. So that, but I basically went through what type of travel we're going to do, what type of training I'm going to do, and things like that. And that took off about 1/3. So regardless of whatever else, I've been able to save 1/3 or about $20,000 of the commodities. There are 5 options, basically, that we have on how to move forward. And I know that I want the city to succeed. I know that the EDA wants the city to succeed. And I know the city wants the EDA and the city to succeed. So we're all working together. The question is how we're going to get to that end. Okay? First, we could identify an employee to serve as an economic development point person. That would probably, I think that would require an assistant, the hiring of an assistant to perform the routine tasks. I estimate the savings of probably about $60,000. The risk is medium-high because of the lack of experience and expertise on the staff. There are some things that are unique to East Grand Forks that are only with 5 communities in the state that you really need to have some expertise about some of those things. Second, hire a consultant to serve as the economic development point person. That would also require an assistant because you're not going to want to pay the consultant to do all the minutia. I was trying to say it in a word
Day-to-day, the
it's
day-to-day
credible,
works.
Okay? Estimated savings would be 0 because the consultant's going to cost us money. And I don't know that between the consultant and the assistant that we're actually going to see any savings on that. I'm skeptical. Risk is medium because of the lack of specific East Grand Forks knowledge about the businesses and the lack of knowledge about specific East Grand Forks programs, such as the Border Cities Enterprise/Development Zone and the disparity tax credits. We could do nothing. Position stays vacant. You save about $150,000. But what does that do for the city? We don't go anywhere. And I don't think that that's a realistic option, but that's... We could hire a replacement economic development director at the development head level, which is where I'm at right now. Estimated savings, probably about $10,000, because that person would start at the lower end of the pay scale. There's low risk because there would be a learning curve, but if we do a small overlap, I could help with some of the things that are unique to East Grand Forks. I'm talking about like the month of August next year. We could hire a replacement economic development administrator at a sub-department head level, reporting to a department head such as the community development director. That's done in many places. Estimated savings would be about $40,000. Requires a new job description for the responsibilities. And again, they're relatively low risk. There'd be a learning curve. There'd probably be less experience. But if we do a small overlap, I could again help with the things that are unique to the city so we can make it as smooth a transition as possible. First, I'm going to suggest that if you have thoughts or comments, let's talk about them. And then I'm going to suggest that we rank these because whatever we do will help us define what needs to be in the budget.
So can you unpack this for me a little bit? Reading your report and then looking at this now, the 2 separate things, the Finance Committee has picked option 1.
I wouldn't say that.
That's
Finance Committee wants...
So it says...
The Finance Committee, when this first came up, the Finance Committee had suggested that it could be done. In fact, it may have happened, Reed, I think it actually happened at a work session when it was brought up. And they suggested that it could possibly be one of the existing city employees. One of the things I pointed out to the council member at the end of the meeting was that it depends on whether or not that person has the expertise to do the job. So that's one option. And I set that in there as an example of something that had been discussed, but there are really the 5 options.
The council ranked they did the ranking, and that's where, I mean, supposedly won. They had like 10 different items from the finance committee, and they ranked on what ones they wanted, what were highest, what were lowest.
Okay.
Okay, and this one was the highest.
I had a question. I know there's been talk about kind of incorporating the position within the city administrator's position as well. There's two questions to this. First question on that is, what happens to Brenda's job if something like that happens? Does she still have her position? Or if the city administrator does that, incorporate the rest of what Brenda's doing into his office as well? Or are we just talking about the director's position?
Just the director's position.
Okay.
Brenda's position, remember, she does a lot of the bookkeeping and accounting for the loans, things of that nature.
Yep.
So that would still continue on as part of her position.
Okay.
And Mr. Hutton and I have talked about that previously.
Second part of the question is, Reed, I'd just like to hear from you. What are your thoughts and feelings about if you had to take on that position as well? I mean, in my mind, that's a insurmountable task to take on, especially with taking on a new position for yourself right now and learning it and staying up to speed and not having things get pushed to the wayside because the city administrator's position is the most important at that time. I know I spoke about it at the last meeting in favor of, I feel we need an EDA director. And I feel that if anything has to give within your position, if that's the way that this went, it would be what's going on with building the city on that part of it. And I don't think that we're in a position to want to go backwards in that part. I'd just like to hear from you on your thoughts on that part of it.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's probably really, really early in my time serving in city administrator to give you a really well-rounded response. But that said, I don't think it's realistic to consider the EDA director and the city administrator as one position. Okay. It's not realistic. There are certain elements of the duties of the EDA director that I think could be handled by a city administrator, but those elements I see being very the front-facing, the public-facing type elements. If there's a face of the EDA that when you're going to have meetings with businesses, whether it's potential businesses or existing businesses, in some of those cases it's been Barry from the chamber, it's been the EDA director and the city administrator, all three attending a meeting like that.
Yep.
That probably doesn't necessarily have to be the case. It could be a city administrator and the chamber director doing that, and then any of the follow-up that would come along with a meeting, whether it's a retention type program or it's a recruitment type program, there would need to be someone else in City Hall that is doing the legwork for that. You know, I could start to facilitate some of those discussions and delegate duties, but I can't see that there's ever a possibility that the city administrator would replace the existing director.
Well, and I'm glad to hear that on your part too, because the first time that I heard that, I thought that was a huge mistake personally. I feel that having a point person and somebody out there actively trying to bring businesses to town, or whether it's talking about open spaces that we have, I think, hey, your business could fill this space good with another location or whatever it may be, is that we have to have that day-to-day person doing those things, in my mind. And so, like I said, when I first heard that we can incorporate, both these positions into one, I'm thinking, how do you incorporate two very full-time positions into one and still get it done in regular work week hours?
I would agree with you on that too. It concerned me when I watched last meeting as well, because it puts us at a disadvantage because we're competing with Grand Forks across the river. I mean, as we've talked and we look around, we have unique niches that are filled by businesses around here. It's not exactly the same, but we got to compete. We don't have a choice. They're right across the river. We need somebody who is focused in on that so that we can compete. Go ahead, Ron.
And if I may, not to put Barry on the spot, but Barry's been involved in city governments and municipalities.
I think there's another,
Mike on, please.
I think there's another variable. I think there might be another variable too. I think if you look at some of the things that happened this last legislative session, I think we're going to have some work from a retention perspective as well. We've only done 3 of the Grow Minnesota visits. We have 20 of them scheduled. Reed came with on them. And I mean, we've already heard some concerns about the Minnesota business climate. So I'm very nervous that we may see some of our existing businesses take a more serious look at moving to North Dakota, and I think we're going to need to do some strong retention efforts, quite frankly. I think that's a threat to the city of East Grand Forks, and I think we're going to need a point person at a minimum to make sure that we keep reaching out to those businesses. I think that's going to be very important.
Tying on to what Barry's saying is if we don't have that point person, and if we are getting messages from the state capitol that making it more difficult for doing business in Minnesota, we as East Grand Forks have just told our businesses we don't care. And that it's not important enough to have a point person on economic development, so why should they care about East Grand Forks? And then the long run comes down, you start losing our tax base, and what's that going to do to our housing taxes? They're going to go through the roof because it's our businesses that bring in that solid base that you know you're going to have. And I think we could be trying to save a few dollars here and in the long run discover we've lost a whole lot more.
We have a couple of unique tools. Remember I mentioned that earlier. The disparity tax credit effectively is a tax cap for commercial properties and for apartment properties. They can only be taxed up to a certain percentage of their value. Above that, when a commercial property owner looks at their tax bill, above that there's a tax credit shown on there. That additional tax is paid by taxpayers to the rest of Minnesota, and it saves our local taxpayers. That's a tool that we have. We're going to probably have to be more aggressive, and we've talked about this before, in the use of some of our border cities tax credits. We get about $100,000 of tax credits each year. We basically have used them with businesses that have performed and have done an expansion so that they can get property tax, basically property tax relief, and it is significant property tax relief if they get that way. But we may have to look to use it in other ways to help businesses that are facing some of the additional costs that have been imposed on them by the Minnesota legislature. So those are things that we're really going to have to be concerned about over the next couple of years. And I will tell you, quite frankly, even though I'm looking forward to going home, I feel somewhat guilty by not being here to help us work through all these issues so that we can make it work for our local community and our businesses. I mean, it just... I feel badly that we're being put into this position right now. So, are there other thoughts or comments?
I'm kind of with Daniel and Justin. With Reed, you know, his previous job he had, they're asking him to help out there somewhat, and then we ask him to help out and do this EDA. When is he going to be an administrator? I mean, seriously, because your previous job would take probably 80% of the job with everything you've had going on, you know, and then, you know, try to fill this job and then they're just enough hours in a day for you. That's just not fair to you that way.
That's his weekend job. That's why he had to leave town this weekend.
The way I see it.
But we are in the process of filling the park and rec.
I know we are, but he's still going to have to
work
work with that gentleman too, because to bring him up to date on stuff. I mean, regardless, he's going to be working with him for the next year probably, because there's a lot of stuff going on there. So it's not something that gentleman's going to be able to just walk in and take over either, just as well as this one. So we need to look at that pretty hard. And the other thing I think we found out on this empty lot, you know, we found out that, you know, you're just not going to walk in and sell that empty lot and do stuff you want to do without going through the EDA. It's very simple. You got to have that EDA because they're the ones that have all those contacts and all the information and all the stuff that these people need to make all that happen. So I think the city council is in such a predicament right now that they're so worried about cutting out all these expenses that we're losing sight of what we need and don't need. That's the way I feel.
And the other thing that could happen, I mean, Reed, I'm really pleased with the selection they made for our city administrator. At the same time, I want to keep him. And if you put all this on him, he's going to go, hey, I don't need this kind of stress.
Didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
So we've heard from the majority of the group that option 4, and I'm on board with.
Do you want 4 or
Yeah.
5? That's the question I have. They're variants on a theme.
I like 4. I mean, if we're having to rank them, I would put 4 as R1.
Yeah.
I
And
don't know
I
how
would
everybody
put,
else would feel about that.
and I would probably put 5 as number 2.
And that was kind of my thought process as well. Number 3 is going to be 5.
Yes.
Can we actually just go ahead and shorten the list to 4 and not have 5?
And I think number 2 is right down there at the bottom as well.
So that would be 4. And so number 1 would be 3.
Yep,
But
that's
basically,
exactly how I have
what
it.
you're saying is that you need to have, in your opinion, it's important to have somebody to serve as the point person, especially with the things that are going on.
Yeah,
The-
I would just add as well, you know, it's good for all of us. We need to get this feedback into the budget committee as well. You know, Dale's comment, I take a different spin at it as they're trying to overturn every stone. And some of it's kind of painful to even talk about, you know, but they got to do the work here. We're all kind of bracing here for next year's property tax increase. So we're trying to get ahead of it. So this is responsible work, even if it's uncomfortable. My ranking's very close to all of yours. You know, number 3, the do nothing is the least attractive. Seems like that's probably off the table, but I'm glad you put it on here, Paul, to kind of rank everything. Number 2, hire a consultant. I do think that'll be a cost increase, not a cost savings.
I was thinking along the same lines. I think it eventually will
minus,
cost us
probably.
more
Yeah.
than what we realize it will.
And, you know, there could certainly be times when a consultant is helpful for a certain new program and they pay for themselves through these programs, but let's use that in special occasions. Option number 1, I'm trying to just focus on this text here. When I read option number 1, I don't assume that says city administrator / EDA director. It's just there's an existing employee out there. So I'm taking a more broad approach at that. And
Sure.
I'm more open to it than maybe some of you are. I would agree that the city administrator is probably not the right role to combine the EDA with, but there may be another department head. And so I'd like to learn more about option 1. So option 1 and 4 are my highest ones. 4 is ideal, but we have to be cognizant of the budget concerns, which I think are real. And then option 5, I'm concerned about getting the right expertise at maybe a sub-department head level. You know, to empower the EDA director role, I do feel like that needs to sit with a department head. Now, even if the department head's responsibilities are reconfigured or there's some adjustment in the org chart, I would just be worried about that being sub-delegated too far down, and then the priorities don't make it up to read in the council. So those are my thoughts, guys and gals.
Is there any, when you retire, is there any plan at all of putting it out to hire it? Or is it just going to be tried to retain within, to
That
hire?
would be,
That's what we're
that's number
discussing.
4.
That's what this discussion, yeah.
That's number 4.
We do number 4.
Justin, what I have talked to Reed about and propose is that we go to hire, I identified my last day in the office, and what I propose is we have somebody start on or about August 1st, so that I will have 3 weeks to go through things with the new person.
Yeah.
Reed, does that, yeah, that's in line with what we've
Yeah,
been
and
talking
I know
about.
it's on this list here, but I was just wondering, is that something that the council is even looking at as one of their options?
Well, I think once, with the, both the committee and the council, I
they
think
talked
want
about
the
it, though?
input.
That's the ad hoc budget committee. Sure. Right.
No, these have not been shared with the council.
Okay.
Paul put these together,
Yeah.
right?
I
This is
just
for
didn't know
us.
if there's a consensus within the council that says, doesn't matter what we have here, we are not going to put this position out to hire a new person or not.
How is
That's
that,
what my
how's
question
the,
is.
how's
There's a
the ad
committee
hoc
like-
committee feeling about this? I mean, where do they see? Do they see that this is,
Who's that?
the ad hoc finance committee, are they like going, yeah, we don't need an economic development director?
Oh, I
We
think
need-
Mr. Larson hit it on the nail here that, you know, they're going through every department and trying to
And
see what can be
I
done.
respect that,
And
because
nothing's
that is
really
what you
been-
have to do.
There's really been nothing brought to the city on anything yet.
You've got to focus on providing our opinion as this group to that communication process, where this group needs to express our strong opinions to that ad hoc
committee, and we have the time to do that now.
I think Diane's opinion here on if this doesn't go, if we don't have an EDA that's functioning very well, it's going to hurt the businesses. We're going to lose the tax base, and then you're going to be in the same position you are now, probably worse, because you're not going to have the money coming in from the tax base that you were expecting. I mean, that's the thing is don't push
You're
it down
talking
the
about
road.
financially.
Financially, I mean, I just see this, if we don't hire an EDA director, this is going to happen again in a few years. I mean, it's just going to continue.
Well, and then I think also that you've got to express to the opinion of Mr. Wilford, because that's a valid, very valid opinion what's going on right now regarding retention in the state of Minnesota. I'm not, that's just from my standpoint, but.
And I think we're at a dangerous spot with the EDA because, and Paul, you deserve to retire. I love retirement, and you're going to great. But what it does, it puts us at a disadvantage in that they don't have to fire anybody. They don't have to worry about any residual costs with having done that. And so it looks like it could be the easy one because it's going to take care of itself. But in the long run, it is going to be detrimental to our city.
I think we're all on board with the same thing here. And then, like I said at the last meeting, Brian, you weren't here, but Dale was, and I, had just mentioned that we need you guys as the representatives of the council on our board to speak on our behalf to the other representatives in those meetings and say we all feel strongly this way about it as a board, and just be our voices for it.
Yeah, and that's what we're here to, is to get that consensus. And, everyone's watching this as well. So, this will carry forward to the ad hoc committee. Neither Dale or I are on that budget committee, but of course we're voting council members as well.
Yeah.
So.
And Barry, we may have a position open if you're interested.
I think there's some other things too, I'm just going to put this, I assume that this is recorded, so it's a public meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're on TV.
I think it's really important that we give some consideration to some of our employers. There are some bigger factors at play. I mean, I look at American Crystal Sugar, and I think they're doubling the size of their Drayton plant right now. And if you're that company, where are you going to expand in the future? I think they've already made the move to Hillsborough and to Drayton, and I think we as a community really need to have some conversations with them to just make sure that they're ready to move, potentially from coal to natural gas. They shut the Becker power plant down, the Minnesota officials did. If they can shut that coal-fired operation down, which is huge, what would it take for them to close down Moorhead, Crookston, and East Grand Forks? And to the public, I'm certainly not saying that that's ever been discussed or going to happen, but I think we need to start looking really seriously at some of those what-ifs and make sure that we're having those conversations with these companies. So I think at this point in time, just the way things are in St. Paul, and I think everybody in East Grand Forks understands that, it's really time that we almost double down on this and really get to work on some of these what-ifs and some of the threats. Because frankly, there's a lot of businesses that I think are kind of in a wait-and-see mode right now, and that's kind of what I'm hearing. So I think we're going to need to do more outreach and have more discussions. It's all pretty apparent if you just start looking around.
The Grow Minnesota business are really emphasizing that right now when we go out and talk with the businesses.
If I could, I'd just like to offer a little bit of more perspective maybe on the ad hoc finance committee discussions that maybe will help further this discussion here. The committee brought to City Council a list of numerous potential cost-saving measures. One of them was the Economic Development Director position. One was selling the Senior Center building. One was raising fees for park and rec activities, to name a few. There were 10, right? 10 initially that were brought forward. Then the City Council's direction was to rank those in order of 1 to 10. Assumedly 10 is the bottom of the level, we're not going to consider it all. 1 is we should put more work into this. Not saying it's done, but we should put more thought and more work into this. From the Senior Center perspective, because I've been really involved in that, and kind of to give you guys an example of what's happening on that discussion, we had a Senior Center board meeting, much like the one you had a month ago here, and every board member across the room said, absolutely not. Will not consider selling the Senior Center building. Okay? Just like all of you said, absolutely not. Will not consider cutting the EDA director position. That's natural. We certainly expect that, right? But are we doing our full level of work if that's the end of the discussion? And I think that's what the finance committee is looking for, is let's take that discussion to the next step then. And I think we've done a good job of that today with some of this discussion. But I would ask one step further on that. At the senior center discussion, when the answer was we're not selling the building, we tasked them with, well, let's have an exercise about what would things look like if the building was sold. We don't want senior center activities to be gone. We don't want to not have a place for senior center programming in our community, but there's potential that the city council could want to see this happen. We need to vet that process one step further. And so we've had discussions with the board. We're continuing to have discussions with the board to say, in a hypothetical world, if the senior center physical structure wasn't standing, what would programming for seniors look like in East Grand Forks? Park and rec activities. We said we can bring in another $100,000 a year in winter program fees to our community if we raise fees to be similar to they are at our neighbors across the river. But we want to understand what that means to people that have kids in our programs. So we've sent that information to the clubs, and the clubs are going to get a chance to take a look at it and say, this is what it would mean to our program numbers. We're concerned about it. We're not concerned about it. You name it. So this is what I would ask to consider here. I hear loud and clear that number 4, hire a replacement director, is the preferred option. That's the easiest way to go, right? Can we have a bigger discussion about another option so that we have something to go back to city council with beyond just saying we're going to rehire a director in the same form it's always been and that's it? Can we? I don't know what that discussion looks like, but to Mr. Larson's point, if 1 is his second option and it's identify another employee, and maybe it's not a specific person, maybe it is we have an open position right now the city council voted on a couple weeks ago. It's the accounting technician position. We asked of that when Water and Light had a position opening a month ago. We asked them to consider, are there other ways that we can staff this department and operate this department? It's the broader view approach to how the city operates, but can we take the economic development director, the accounting technician, some form of that, some of the duties that Brenda is already doing, can we look at some of those job descriptions and say, is there a way to kind of like redesign how this is set? And maybe we don't save 1 full FTE off of it, but maybe we find a way to save a half an FTE. And that means $40,000 to $60,000 a year in savings. I don't know what the direction would be of this board to be able to kind of form a subcommittee or a sub-discussion about that. But I think from my perspective, that's what the finance committee is trying to turn rocks over and unearth some stones and say, we've gone through all of it. We've vetted this process very thoroughly. At the end of the day, we still think option 4 is our best option, but if we need to find some savings, here's a recommendation from our board. And I fear if we don't bring that from the board level up the chain to city council, that it might come from the city council down, and then none of us are very happy with what the end result is, right?
And you triggered something in my thought, Reed. Should we be looking at it as we have an economic development, what more can they do for the city? Is there something that we still... I think one of my issues is not calling him the economic development director. If you start calling him, the administrator or the assistant or that kind of a thing, it has taken away some of that stature that the business community sees that person as, okay? And so is there something that we as an economic development authority can add into what we do that saves money that way? Does that make sense? That instead of saying, somebody's going to absorb us, what can we do to absorb so that we still keep that director level and but yet still help save money?
I would agree with you, Reed, that I think that there is other discussions to be had about things. And the number 1, like you had mentioned, is there something that somebody else can take on and save some money there? I'd be all for it if that was where things came to. I think Barry's comments just reiterated more in my mind of the reason that we do need a point person, though. I mean, without hearing his comments, I'd be like, yeah, I could go for that. And then hearing what he has to say, things that I don't know about, and hearing what's going on at state levels and stuff makes it even more scary for our Minnesota businesses or East Grand Forks businesses to like he said, retention is going to be the biggest thing. I think back on more work that went into keeping a business in East Side when we reworked loan programs and stuff to keep Northern Valley Machine in East Grand Forks. And the comment that I always make to people was, they were looking at a building out on Highway 2, further out in Grand Forks. And my comment I made to people was that was a huge retention for us, not only as keeping that business in this town, but for how many people they employ that probably also live in East Grand Forks. In my mind, and now this is just hypothetically speaking, is that if they would have moved that far out in Grand Forks and it takes East Grand Forks residents 20 minutes to drive to work, the people that work for them that are looking at, hey, we're in our starter home and it's time for us to look for a new, bigger home for our family. What does that look like? Do 80% of those people now look at homes on Grand Forks side? Because yes, income tax is cheaper and now they're closer to work if we would have lost that business. In my mind, that's what happens. So not only is it a losing businesses, it's a potential about losing citizens because now, my job moved out over here now and they might be out on 47th in Grand Forks and it takes 25 minutes to drive to work. Well, now I'm going to look at a house on the south end of Grand Forks and be 5 minutes from work and save some income tax. So I think there's bigger ramifications to just losing the business also. And that's always been my thought. And I know that was a bigger project that we had dove pretty deep into as a board and what can we do and how can we do this to save this business and keep those employees living in this town. And then, like I said, when Barry kind of reiterated more in my mind of the reason why we need that full-time position, point person.
I'm sorry.
You have something, Brian?
Just, you got to balance that with the increase in the property tax levy. If we've got a 20% increase in our property tax levy, we're going to lose people as well.
Right.
So, and I know everyone that's the unspoken, kind of specter in the room here that we've got to find a way to balance all the benefits of the EDA with a reasonable property tax here.
I think one of my fears is when we see that we identify an employee that's going to serve as the economic development point person. Okay, if that person already has a full-time job, I'm fearful that will become not important to them because it's not their area of expertise. They didn't go to school to become an economic development director. They didn't study that stuff and now how do we guarantee that we're not going to get lost in that shuffle? That's my fear is that we've got someone who's pointed to it, but you know what? That's not their focus area. I do it, yeah, but I don't really do it. And I don't want that to happen.
And I guess from my perspective too, just looking at number 2 on the hiring a consultant, that one I'm very leery of because it's one of those things that once you hire that person, let's just say that there's several projects to come up that require more time. All of a sudden they're over whatever budget you have at that point in time. What do? Do you go over the budget or do you just say, we're just done? I mean, I really think that being number 2 on the list there, it's a pretty slippery slope right there with that, especially not having expertise in this area with everything that's changing in Minnesota right now too. And I also think it would be hard to find a consultant that's just going to work for East Grand Forks at that moment in time. They're going to be working for multiple places and they're going to be dealing with a lot of different problems. So that one really concerns me being as high on that list.
I think it seems like they've had success in smaller towns where it just isn't reasonable to have an EDA. I know Warren or Foston, I believe, has been
I think they said Thief River last meeting. Did somebody say Thief River does it?
Yeah, Thief River and Boston actually have the same consultant.
Yeah, but consultant costs add up so quickly.
And both of those cities are not right there next to North Dakota either. I know there's a little bit of competition, but they're not literally right next door. So with that, is everybody, Ron, you got something?
The only thing that I was going to say is, 1, I got to get going. I have another commitment. 2, if you're going to do anything other than hire an EDA director, we've got bylaws and we've got an enabling ordinance. I'm going to have to put forward a process to be able to do that because a different resolution will have to be passed to control the EDA board because it's kind of a subset from the city.
That would come from the council, right?
Well, it would start out on this end. Yes. And then, then just.
See, we're cutting lawyer costs right now if we just
There you
hire
go.
an EDA director. Just saying.
And then on the Hawks manufacturing loan, I have been in contact with Kevin. I've got pretty much all of the documents ready. I've provided them with Barry, just got to look through them. Or with Paul. I was just looking at Barry. And then with Paul. And then I'd have to set up a closing and then figure out the settlement charges. But other than that, it's pretty much ready to go if it gets approved. Okay? Thank you.
So with the succession plan for the director here, do we need to go ahead and do a vote for what we put in
My
order?
question, Reed, does this discussion, this further discussion, provide you the information you need as well?
Yeah, I think the discussion has been great. It's I feel like I know the direction from the board, yeah.
Yeah, I think they've articulated what their thoughts are and the reasons for why they've chosen a particular option and why they would prefer a particular option.
I think we all know we want number 4, because we'd like it to stay status quo. But I think I could support some type of a modification to it as long as we really feel that it's being addressed, that we don't want economic development to get lost.
One other thing I want to add is that, the legislative session it's just fairly recently over, so we're kind of in a wait and see. We're learning a little bit yet. And, I'm just talking a little hypothetically here, but, we just had 100 businesses in Grand Forks have an hour-and-a-half listening session with Mayor Buczynski about how do we be the most business-friendly community we possibly can. And I think East Grand Forks, I think that the timing is right in East Grand Forks to have, how do we grow our tax base? How do we be more business-friendly? What are some things that we can do strategically and put this person's time to work on areas that are strategically going to grow our tax base? Because it's to your point, our budget is going to be upside down unless we can continue to do that. So it might be a 3-year, 5-year plan, but I think that this community kind of needs to circle the wagons a little bit and be really razor-sharp strategic as we look at what we have that new person, whether it's part-time, point person, full-time. I think this is a really good time to do that because I think there's some new threats and some new opportunities, as you pointed out, on the horizon. So I view this as an opportunity for East Grand Forks to kind of sharpen its saw a little bit and move forward in a positive way.
And remember, we have our strategic plan in place, and one of the things I had been planning to do after the first of the year is bring that forth and review it. I'd like to review it so it's fresh in our minds, but also when the new person, however that might be done, comes on board or is assigned the responsibilities, to have that person be absorbed and be able to bring it back next year as well and follow up on it, so that person's fully embraced into that strategy.
Actually, I was reading a national EDA survey thing, and Minnesota was in the top 10. I think they were number 5, and North Dakota was below of where to have a business, which was really interesting. No, I was dumbfounded. I think they were number 5. I think you saw it too, Reed. But yeah, and North Dakota was lower. So I don't know but they look at a lot of things. It wasn't, so. But I just found it very interesting. I was like, wow. So there are a lot of good reasons to be in Minnesota. We just have to get them out there.
For sure.
So do we need a roll call vote on this order that we put these in?
Can I just take as a sense, basically, what I hear is 4, 5, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I can get behind that.
With some sentiment also.
Somewhat in that order.
Okay.
Somewhere in there, and then it's all, all of our comments are out now, so, I think we've said our piece.
I think 2 and 3 are really not things that we should look at all.
I don't know, maybe 2 will work depending on if we can get a consultant, I don't know, maybe. I don't know what he's going to charge us. All All right, then,
You said it, you expect the fees to be higher.
well, I would imagine, yeah. So then we'll move on to number 7 then?
Yes,
And we'll
please.
get on to new business here. So the Hawks Manufacturing computer loan,
Hawks Manufacturing is borrowing $147,000 for computers, for their services and inventory control to run the
Okay,
business.
what's the total cost of the project?
$147,000.
So we're not loaning them $147,000?
No,
Okay.
They have
I just-
asked for $49,000, one-third of the cost from us.
yep.
Move
which is in-
approval of loan committee recommendation.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Larson,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Black,
Yes.
Hecht,
Yes.
Horken,
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, do we have a movement for adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Too bad.
Well, thanks for showing up, Barry. It's good to see you.